Hello everyone, welcome to Cyberscoop TV. Greg Otto, your managing editor here. We're coming to you from the floor of the 2018 RSA conference. I'm talking with Jimmy Graham, the Director of Project Management for Qualys. Jimmy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, talk to me about the things you're seeing when it comes to patch management. I know you get to oversee a lot of the data that Qualys is scanning, and there's a lot to pull out from that. So tell me what you're seeing.
There is. So, something that we noticed, especially with WannaCry, was that organizations tend to fall into one of three categories. They were either performing very active patch management, a little bit more proactive, where they're patching after the patch comes out. Then we saw organizations that patched after the exploit came out. So when the Shadow Brokers release happened, we saw organizations that started patching then. But then a very large number of organizations still waited until WannaCry was actually out in the wild. And then we saw massive remediation after that. So it's different maturity levels based on different organizations. So obviously it's better to be in that first category than the last. But that's what we've seen from the data that we've seen.
So this year, one of the big things around patching was the Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities. I'd love to know what you're seeing there, because I know a lot of the patches that were released, they needed to be released 3 or 4 times because they broke other things along the way.
Yeah, so we saw a little bit more delayed patching for Meltdown and Spectre, which is probably a good idea because it was a very major change to how memory is handled within the operating systems. So because of that, we did see some delays. The trend on patching was definitely a lot less significant from what we saw with something like WannaCry, where you had an active exploit against it. With no exploits available, with it being only really a privilege escalation vulnerability, we didn't see nearly as much emphasis on remediation. And I think in a lot of ways that's okay. This was something that you didn't want to just deploy without testing. Thorough testing was very much needed, and that's what we saw based on the trends.
So when vulnerabilities go out like this and the patches follow, I'd love to hear the average time you're seeing enterprises take the patch, because it is a basic cyber hygiene move, but we are still talking about it the same way we were talking about it decades ago. In order for it to be, in order for it to actually work inside the enterprise, things need to happen, but we know that's not happening. So I want to know what you're seeing as far as what the data is telling you when it comes to patch management.
So I don't have the data on hand in terms of what the average is, but what we recommend is to have a patch cycle that allows you to address these patches within a reasonable time frame. The minimum there, since Microsoft's on a 30-day patch cycle or a 1-month patch cycle, it makes sense to get those patches out within the 30 days. If an organization had done that, WannaCry wouldn't have been an issue. Because the patch was out even before the patch was out, and then they could have had their systems patched even before the exploit was available, and well before the malware is actually out in the wild. So that's, we recommend that people separate their patch management processes from their vulnerability management processes. You really shouldn't be waiting for your vulnerability management solution to tell you there's a vulnerability when it comes to patching. Patching should be happening on its own, basically, on a regular cycle. And in the case of emergency patching, it's important to still deploy, still test, but obviously you can compress those time frames a bit if it's an emergency. But in the case of WannaCry, a lot of organizations walked away from WannaCry with the idea of we need a better emergency patching process, which is, it's not a bad takeaway because everyone does need an emergency patching process, but WannaCry should not have been an emergency patch. It should have been within the routine patching cycle. And that's something that I've been talking with a lot of customers and organizations and making sure that they're understanding the proper takeaways from this. If WannaCry was impacting or WannaCry was an emergency patch, you need to take a look at your actual routine patching processes, make sure those are in order, and then also on top of that have an emergency patching process.
Great. Jimmy, appreciate your insight. Thanks for talking with us a little bit today.
No problem.
For all of our videos, check out our YouTube channel, and for more on WannaCry patch management and all things cybersecurity, check out cyberscoop.com. I'm Greg Otto. Thanks for watching.